Okay, so in the Epistle of Hebrews, we have an extended meditation on a verse of the Psalm, which, as someone who's teaching a class on the Psalms, I heartily approve. And it's the today if you hearken to my voice, right, and then that you shall not, and then if you disobey, you shall not enter my rest. And so it's this extended meditation on what does it mean, what does God's rest mean, and what does it mean to be invited into God's rest. And so this passage is critical because it links the past, the future, and brings them into the present. So by quoting in this passage, quoting Genesis, the passage from Genesis, on the seventh day he rested from all his works, it puts it into the context of creation, right? So rest, therefore, is a part of God's creative activity, right? So it's not rest in the form of inactivity. Rest is a form of enjoyment. So this is something, and people have to get this kind of square in their head. So what does it mean for God to have rested, and what does it mean for us as Christians to rest? And and by the way, so let's bookmark that. So then you have and then it says, now in the Psalm, David wouldn't, if Joshua had given them rest when they entered into the land, the Holy Spirit wouldn't have said to David, "Today you shall enter into my rest," because David is after Joshua, right? So therefore, David must have been speaking about a future time of rest. So the rest that God's people are called to enter lay in the future. And so with this link with Genesis, which is the creative activity of God, so rest is part of God's creative activity. It lay in the future for those who believe, right? So therefore, rest becomes a part of new creation, that rest is expressive of the new creative reality of God in Jesus Messiah. And so the idea of rest, so it's like people think, oh, when I get to heaven, that's when I rest and I'm not doing anything. I guess, sometimes you just, some versions you're just looking at God or something. I don't know what it is. But in the biblical way that they're using that word about rest, it's the same as if you spent all day getting a meal ready. It's like Thanksgiving dinner, right? It's like you got the side dishes, it's like the mashed potatoes, and then you got the turkey, and you got your base in the turkey, and the pies. So lots of work going on, work all day. The turkey's going, they're going, and then everybody sits down, seated at the right hand of the Father. Okay, so I'm connecting these. This is what these metaphors mean. So people then sit down to the table and they rest by eating the meat, by enjoying that which they have prepared through their labors, right? Through their works. They rest from their labors because now they get to enjoy the meal, which is activity, right? There's activity, there's talking, there's laughing, there's, and fellowship and love and food and eating. It's like, blah, blah, blah. So the resting does not mean inactivity. It means enjoyment. It means communion, fellowship with one another, right? Sitting around a table face to face. That's rest, right? Instead of the work. Right? And so when God rests, with that, it's this beautiful image, by the way, of Genesis, that God rests from his works. Well, who does he rest with? Adam and Eve. See, it's like God sits down to table with Adam and Eve. It's a Thanksgiving dinner with Adam and Eve in the garden in paradise, where everything is prepared. It's ready to sit down, right? And thus the tragedy of take, eat, right? Take and eat the apple that God does. And it's like stealing food from someone who's invited you to their house and put on a sumptuous meal, and then you go into their fridge and you take something, right, that they didn't set out for you. I mean, that's just bad form, right? You're probably going to be excused from being in the house. That's Genesis 3, right there. There you go. So when we're called to enter into God's rest of new creative activity. That in a sense, when we trust in Jesus's labor, his work on the cross for us, that Jesus did the work so that we may have the rest. so that we can enjoy God's love, enjoy communion with one another, be able to forgive one another, because Jesus did the work to prepare that meal, that life, right? The bread of life. He did all that work, and it all comes together in Jesus. And God invites us into the final rest of his new creation, which is called to start today. Today, if you hearken to my voice, so that that future rest, that future enjoyment is called to start right now. Right now. And so the Christian life is one lived in the sense in which we are working, in a sense we have to labor because we're in this world, we're in the present age, and yet we're also called to enjoy the rest of the age to come with each other. And that's what that eighth day, that first and eighth day of Sunday, when we gather together for that sacred meal, that is us resting, enjoying the life that is to come in the midst of the life that we now live. And so we're called to be beacons of joy, places of rest, of homecoming and enjoyment and feasting in the world. That's our vocation. Good stuff. A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. While the promise of entering his rest is still open, let us take care that none of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For indeed, the good news came to us just as to them. But the message they heard did not benefit them, because they were not united by faith with those who listened. For we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said, "As in my anger I swore, they shall not enter my rest," though his works were finished at the foundation of the world. For in one place it speaks about the seventh day as follows, "And God rested on the seventh day from all his works." And again, in this place it says, "They shall not enter my rest." Since therefore it remains open for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience, again he sets a certain day, today, saying through David much later, in the words already quoted, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not speak later about another day. So then, a Sabbath rest still remains for the people of God. For those who enter God's rest also cease from their labors, as God did from his. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.